ability to feel an emotion in any way, shape, or form. I was completely physically disconnected, and that's how I dealt with pain. This continued for years. At some point, you're gonna get to a point where your trauma limits your growth, or it's self-destructive. I've been doing research around the use of MDMA and psychedelics for PTSD, and the numbers were amazing. It was obvious that this was the way.
People that haven't done it don't know what the light switch is. But the next day it was like somebody turned on the lights. And it's hard to explain because in conventional therapy, it's never that. It's this way, then it's this way, then it's this way. And 30 years later, it might be this way. But it goes from here to here in no time. There's so many people that are living in this desperation of childhood trauma that was ruling their lives. They know something's wrong, but they can't point to it and they can't fix it. That's true desperation.
I'm having a reoccurrence of my stage 4 ovarian cancer. We found out that it had come back in June, July of last year. A lot of the reasons that people have cancer is it's one of the switches that turns it on, is the stresses of the trauma, is the things that you are maybe holding on to that you need to release, and doing stuff like this, like ayahuasca or whatnot, can help with releasing that.
And I've tried everything, and so this is kind of what you do. You do these things either with inspiration or desperation, and kind of where I'm at right now is kind of desperation. So I'm putting everything in on this particular practice, hoping it's going to give me some success and bring back some quality of life. It's very difficult for me because this is massively out of my comfort zone. Like even, what you're eating, everything needs to be different this week. So it's going to be a learning curve, but I'm looking forward to it.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Psychedelics Revealed. I've done a lot of docu-series with Revealed films over several years, exploring random subjects that are usually interesting, maybe controversial. I have to say that the exploration of psychedelics has been something that is just categorically different than anything else we've done. This is a very controversial subject. There's a lot of rhetoric around psychedelics, a lot of, let's say, the hangover from the 60s and the 70s and that sort of drug culture and how bad these things are for society. But many have argued that there are applications for psychedelics that can have dramatically positive impact on people's lives, and I think you're about to discover that this is true. What I found going through this entire experience and exploring this subject is that this is truly, and pardon the pun, mind-blowing. I don't care what your frame of reference is as far as what you think about psychedelics, drugs, and this whole scene, as it were. I am telling you that there is information here, there's understanding here, and there's experience here that if you haven't really dug into this, it's going to open your eyes and open your mind to new possibilities for human beings. We're at an interesting intersection here, as you'll see. There's a lot of turmoil within the psychedelic community. The medicalization of psychedelics is something that many people are worried about, that it's going to lose its heart, it's going to lose its spirit. There is a spiritual aspect to this experience that you'll see people reporting that it's truly transformational for their lives. There are universities, like we went to Johns Hopkins University and interviewed some of the people in their psychedelics lab, as well as people from MAPS and other places. We also looked at people who are more in the psycho-spiritual side of this. They're not worried about academia. They're not looking at pharmaceutical applications for these particular substances, but they're looking at a transformation of personal spirit. This is an amazing topic to talk about non-ordinary states of consciousness that is having an impact on people's lives that if you don't see it firsthand right here in this series, you would not believe it, because I know I wouldn't. So with that, let's start our journey and jump into episode 1 of Psychedelics Revealed. You know, some people refer to psychedelics as being life-saving, and in many instances, I don't think they're exaggerating at all. Larry Yatch, who's become a dear personal friend of mine, is a former Navy SEAL commander. Spent a lot of time in the Mideast running missions. And as you'll see in this interview, he was in a bad place once his Navy SEAL career was over, and psychedelics played a role in getting him back to life. So without giving it all away, I want to invite you to listen to this very powerful interview with former Navy SEAL Commander Larry Yatch. Larry, thanks for taking the time to have this conversation.
I'm really glad to be here.
So you have this, remarkable background. People see this kind of stuff in movies, but you actually live it, or did live it.
I did.
Yeah.
I survived it.
You survived
it. Probably a better word.
So just talk about your background, where you went to school and how you ended up becoming a SEAL team commander.
For me, it all started in 3rd grade with Top Gun, Tom Cruise. I saw Top Gun and decided I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and found out all the best fighter pilots came from the Naval Academy. So before 3rd grade was done, I was dead set on serving the country through being a fighter pilot. And fast forward a couple years, it was about 7th or 8th grade when I found out about the Navy SEALs. And this would have been in the late 80s. No one knew what a Navy SEAL was. I didn't either. But I went and found a book called The Men with Green Faces, which was a Vietnam-era SEAL book. And by the end of the book, I decided fighter pilots were pansies, and I needed to be a Navy SEAL. Problem is, I was a little skinny dork that got picked on in Pittsburgh. If there was a sport with a ball or a team, I was useless, and growing up in the city in Pittsburgh like that is not going to be good. And I was a little skinny dork because I wanted to go to the Naval Academy, so studied hard. Any sport they let me join, I did to try and pad my resume, and that led to a lot of negative, unwanted attention. And eventually, I did get into the Naval Academy and graduated from there with a engineering degree in 1998, and went straight into the SEAL program. So, as an officer in the Navy, went through SEAL training in the winter of 1998 to 99.
How many people started that training with you?
We started with 135 guys.
And how many people graduated?
11 of their original 135.
135 and 11 are the ones who made it through?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, and those 135 come from probably 1,500 to 2,000 applicants. So just to get to be one of those 135 is really, really hard.
Wow.
And then only 11 actually made it through with my class.
Wow. Okay, so then you got through that training, but you're an officer because you're a graduate of the Naval Academy.
Yeah, commissioned officer. So we go through the same training side by side with the enlisted men that we will eventually lead, and ultimately the instructors are all enlisted SEALs, and so they know that as an officer coming through, if I make it through, there's a good chance that I'm going to be their boss someday.
Wow.
And as a boss in the SEALs, if I make a bad choice, it's not like they have extra work, they might die.
Right.
And so they put a lot of attention on the officers going through to make sure only the good ones make it through.
Wow. So then you went into combat in the Mideast?
Yeah, so I graduated in 1999. There's another about a year worth of training, and I selected to go to SEAL Team 3, which was responsible for the Middle East in what was 99. And there's peacetime, right? No war on the horizon. So at that point, I picked SEAL Team 3 because I figured if anything was going to happen, it was going to happen in the Middle East. And as we know, it was very accurate.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing 3 full deployments into the Middle East and Southeast Asia from 1999 to 2000. It would have been about 2006, 2007. Wow. And I was injured a number of times eventually through a botched back surgery. My career was ended in 2007, and then I was medically retired in 2008.
Wow. And so once you came through all that and you got medically retired, were you planning, in other words, do you think you still stayed in and been deployed more times? Was that your vision for your future?
Definitely. I was not done with my career. There's a few other things I wanted to accomplish, and I would have stayed in for a minimum of 5 or 6 more years, if not, the full 20 at that point. This was a very, very busy time, and I was, I would say fortunate, but most people would look at me crazy for saying that, in that every time I deployed into a combat environment, which isn't normal, right? Based on popular culture, people think every time a SEAL leaves his house, something blows up and they go and fight. But the reality is we cover the whole world 24/7, 365 days a year. So the vast majority of SEALs don't see any combat because the world's only in conflict in very small areas. But I was lucky to get to go to each of those areas every time that I deployed.
So now you're, I guess, in your post-surgical circumstance, you're, I guess, injured physically, and I think a lot of pain based on the types of injuries you had, especially nothing worse than botched back surgery. I mean, that's the worst. Knowing you from my own background, I kind of understand what that is. And then, the psychological trauma, saying, your career is over before you wanted it to be over. And then I have to imagine that maybe there was some psychological scars from combat.
It goes even deeper than that. So I hurt my back 2 years, maybe 2.5 years before I had the surgery, but based on what was going on in those times, so that would have been 2004, 2005, 2004 and 5 was the height of both Iraq and Afghanistan. And so we were in a severe need for SEALs, right? There just wasn't enough of us to do the jobs. And I still had teammates that were in harm's way, so I chose not to get medical care, and within that continued to operate with a severe back injury. And they just kept medicating. So I was, for almost 1.5 years, I was taking 8 to 12 Vicodin a day.
Whoa.
Just to be able to operate. And most people would be on the couch drooling, and I'm operating in some of the hardest terrain, hardest environments, just out of sheer will, with intense pain. And about 1.5 years into that, got scheduled a back surgery, and I was in charge of a unit that did special missions, and there were very few of us trained in this particular domain, and a mission came up for my unit that I was the only one qualified for in the country. And so I canceled the surgery and went overseas to Lebanon for almost 1 year. It was 10 months. I was operating by myself with one other Special Forces warrant officer. It was by far the most dangerous mission I was in, just based on not having a team to support us.
Wow.
And no medical care. And so it just kept getting worse and worse. When I got back, they scheduled another surgery, and I ended up in the hospital without my legs working. My right leg stopped working. They then gave me the same dose of morphine they would give someone that was gunshot for 45 days.
Wow.
Because they couldn't get me in for surgery. And I went through the surgery. It was fusion, L4, L5 fusion, and the surgeon nicked the L4, L5 nerve root.
Oof.
So I woke up to the feeling of boiling oil being poured down my hip and leg as the nerves died.
Oof.
And he came in and said that, hey, you did so much damage, there's so much scar tissue, I nicked the nerve root, your SEAL career's over, and then left. That was the last I saw him. So the story gets worse from there. He said I was going to lose all the feeling in the L4, L5 pathway. And then they didn't look at my record, my medical record, so they treated me as a normal back surgery patient. And 1.5 days after surgery, they took me off all narcotics, cold turkey.
Ugh.
So I'd had 1.5 years of handfuls of Vicodin a day. I'd had more morphine than they should give someone for a day and a half, much less 45 days. And then for 2.5 days, I went into full narcotic withdrawal.
Wow.
With a fused back and dying nerves. And because of how busy it was, we couldn't get anyone to do anything about it. And so I'm going into full shaking, seizures. I mean, it was horrible after this scenario, and we finally got a doctor to see it, and they look at the record, look at me, and like, oh crap, we messed up.
Wow.
And so then there was what would have been almost 3.5, 4 months of weaning off the drugs. And as a SEAL, I don't have an addictive personality and significant willpower, so it was easy to stick to the standards. But I then suffered for almost 1.5 years with massive withdrawal symptoms.
Wow.
So yeah, that was the really fun part of the end of my career.
So, and I think this is all really kind of germane because you have to understand the full weight of the context of your trauma, mentally, physically, etc. At that point, you're trying to re-enter now, I guess civilian life. And I remember one time you showed me a picture of you back then, and it's like you look lifeless. I mean, it's like you just seemed like there's no life. You look like death, like no life in your eyes. What did it feel like to be you, and then how did psychedelics come into your life, and what happened?
So then I have the bright idea. So at this point in time, I have the bright idea to become an entrepreneur. So my SEAL career is over, and I decided I'm going to start a business while going through all this stuff. And one of the biggest losses is the loss of the team, right? So I always had support. Now everyone's deployed, and I was literally by myself in a room going through all this stuff, which again creates more and more trauma. So you've got the physical trauma I've been through, you've got the emotional trauma of combat, and you've got the physical/emotional trauma of the drugs, the medical situation, career being taken from me. And one of the things that enabled me to be an officer in the SEALs was a complete separation from emotions and body, in that I had taught myself to not feel anything emotionally or physically. I mean, there are times where I'd have metal sticking out of my body and someone would point. I had no idea. There was times in Iraq where I remember one time we're in this camp outside of Saddam's palace, and mortars start coming in. We've been patrolling for 20 some days, where maybe I got 3 hours of sleep every other day, constant stress, constant exposure to significant risk. And I remember poking my head out of the tent, seeing the mortars coming in, knowing there's nowhere to go that was safe, and just like, well, I'm going back to sleep. I'm gonna go back to sleep. And I think now, like, how crazy had my guys thought, like, either I'm a superhero or nuts, or probably a combination of both, that no fear, because I didn't feel fear. I couldn't experience it. And so that's what I entered into civilian life. Like, that's why it was absolute death. I had no concern for my life. I'd given that up a long time ago. I had no ability to feel an emotion in any way, shape, or form, and I was completely physically disconnected, and that's how I dealt with pain.
Wow. So you started an entrepreneurial track, trying to get business going from that particular...
In 2008, which was awesome.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Timing is everything.
Great. Yeah, it was really awesome to start and invest $1 million into a business in 2008, 2009.
Wow.
So that just created even more trauma, for sure. I mean, being in these situations of no money, no cash, debts to owe, challenges in starting the business. And so within all of this, I'm just making it worse over and over again. And this continued for years. I guess it would have been about 5.5 years ago now. So we're 2001, we're talking about 2015, thereabouts. And my wife she's the one, we met right at the end of my career when I was really hurt and deploying my last couple times. And she was really the one that saved me. I mean, I would not be here today if it wasn't for her, in that I remember, it's not really fair, but I was about to go to Lebanon, and we were early on dating, and she's like, maybe we should not see each other anymore. And I remember telling her, okay, if you're saying you don't want me to, I have nothing else of any value in my life in the States, so I'll just go overseas and fight bad guys till I die, if that's what you're saying. And
wow.
She's like, well, maybe we can date.
That's a little heavy.
Yeah, it's not a lot, not good. But she was with me through getting through all this. And it was fast forward now to 2015, living with no physical connection, no emotional connection, living in constant trauma and constantly creating a space of trauma to stay in it. She finally was done with it. And at this point we had would have been a 2-year-old and another boy on the way, and she just was done with it very justifiably.
Yeah.
And that's where a friend had given me had talked about it was like a personal development program, which I always thought was for losers. And and I don't need motivation. I need someone to motivate me. And that was really the start. So I went to that. But at this point, I try anything. Went to that, got a little bit of emotional connection. I've been doing research around the use of MDMA and psychedelics for PTSD. And the numbers were amazing, right? It was obvious that this was the way. This would have been in 2013, 2014, so very early on in this piece. And there's just no access to it. And I just gave up with the hope that I would have any chance to leverage that. And then it would have been about a year later, so 2016 or so, thereabouts, I found a group in Florida and that offered this type of work, and they were trauma focused.
And what was it specifically that they were using?
So they were using a combination of, and this I'm not sure 100%, but a combination. They have what they refer to as an empathogen, so something that worked along the heart side, so the serotonin side. I believe it was mostly sassafras, and then they had a combination of ayahuasca and psilocybin that was in a chocolate format.
Wow.
And so I got introduced to that, and I remember being really scared based on the fact, this was my biggest worry. If I lose control, right, or if these medicines get me to a state where I'm not in control, I have a significant capacity for violence that I control every minute of every day. If I lose that, no one's going to be able to stop me. And I don't want to wake up all of a sudden and see that I've hurt someone. And that was my biggest concern.
It's interesting that that's in the background, right? That I guess that you feel like there's this brooding edge towards violence, and that you're keeping keeping the horse in the barn kind of a thing.
It's one of those Clydesdales, and it's I don't know if it's a full barn, if not just like a little fence. But yeah, my whole life I've had this burning edge of and the way I say is it's a capacity for doing violence, and I leverage that very well. And I've spent my whole life like the Hulk, right? Just keeping the Hulk put away unless he needs to come out. And what was nice about the SEALs is we're trained so well that it's a conditioned response. We go into the use of violence with no emotion. Yeah. So there is no anger or frustration or rage or anything. It is literally a stimulus response. If there's a threat, there's an appropriate response to that threat. So I didn't have to worry. I was never the Hulk. It was the other end of it. If anything, I felt very peaceful in times of significant violence based on the fact that I was able to just turn off my brain and allow my training to take over. But that doesn't mean that a Hulk's still there, and that was the worry of going into these experiences.
When did it up happening?
It's interesting. So I've come to learn that the strength of your subconscious determines your psychedelic experience, and the subconscious is driven. I've come to see that those with intelligence, so depending on the intelligence level. Second thing would be grit and perseverance. So that's a level, right? Some people don't have a ton of grit and perseverance, and some people have a whole lot. And the other is mental structure. Are you very mentally structured? Is there a lot? Is it linear? Is everything fit into a box, or is it more on the other side of openness? And now I don't put any judgment on good or bad to any of those things, but what I found, and I've got a decent amount of experiences with this now, is that those that are of high intelligence, significant grit, and a lot of mental structure, they need a whole lot of psychedelic medicine to break it's like an anchor chain that keeps you chained. And so that was my experience when I got in. Finding the right place that does dosing well in a right environment with the right people is critical. And I got lucky that I found a place that was very good with dosing, that had a very good structure of how they ran things, and that there were people that could be trusting and supportive. And so my experience wasn't a profound experience. It was interesting. I brought another friend of mine, a guy that I'd gone through SEAL training with, that had some big traumas. And in this experience, we spent time together talking, and I was able to help him through something that I've been trying 10 years to get him to get through, to see. And that's when I saw the power of it. So for my particular experience, nothing profound, nothing big, but to me, I saw it as a window of opportunity. If I could produce or help this type of change for him, then that was going to be possible for me as well. So we both got back from that, walked in to my wife, and as soon as we walked in the door, she immediately said, "Holy shit, something's different with both of you. Yeah. Whatever you did, I'm doing it too. Like, I'm in." And so there was change in me. I couldn't tell you what that is. She saw it immediately, and that started my journey. And my journey with this type of work was a year, almost a year long.
Do you give any thought to what if this never came? Like, where do you think the path you're on would have led you?
I would have been dead, 100%.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. Wow. And I'm not a quitter, never quit anything in my life, so I wouldn't have committed suicide, but I would have died because of my particular traumas and the way that I countered those traumas and what the SEALs had done to my neurochemistry. So being in an environment that's adrenalized all the time, the dial for adrenaline gets stuck open. And so if there's adrenaline in your system, it dumps it. And so you get not only adrenal fatigue, because the adrenals can't keep up with it, but you're in a constant state of adrenaline. Like, I knew for 10 years that someone was trying to kill me. Like, I didn't make it up. This isn't made up. Like, there's actual people on a regular basis trying to kill me. And when I got out, it's very hard to turn that off. Like, I knew not only were people trying to kill me, but everything was about to go to shit every minute of the day. Like, that wasn't made up either. Helicopters catch on fire, boats sink, mortars come in all the time. And so when I got out of that, I'm living in a neurochemical state of everyone's trying to kill you, and I know everything's going to go to shit right away. That's what my body neurochemically is doing. My brain knows that that's not true, and my environment is not supporting that, but there's a gap, and that gap causes pain, suffering, costs energy. So I would constantly create environments that would bring alignment with that. So I only felt normal if I was about to die. So here's a guy that's had 14 surgeries to get put back together. I joined a professional skydiving team. I become a racing instructor. I do anything that I can do to put myself in an environment, an actual environment where I'm about to die, because then I could relax. Like, oh, finally, it feels normal. And I would be normal. Like, you saw those pictures being dead. When I landed from parachuting, you'd be like, oh, Larry's alive. So my wife, who loves me, would send me, like, you have to jump at least once a week. You have to go race a car. You have to go do something. Do that, because it's the only time she'd see me be alive. And being in that environment is very hard. That's why my businesses never succeeded. I couldn't, because if they succeeded, I wouldn't have the adrenalized response.
So now, I guess you said a course of a year or so, you went into varying, I guess, psychedelic. Many sessions, and at that point, or I guess fast forwarding to today, do you feel like you're emotionally connected now? I mean, how are you feeling today, compared to your pre-psychedelic life?
So the experiences for me were both, each one was another step, right? Another step in the process. And I'm a linear person, so it was a very linear experience, and I had a wide variety of experiences, and some of which were pretty profound as well as big. Like one particular one that was very impactful, and one that, again, this speaks to the power of these medicines, is that one of the problems with trauma is that when you go through a trauma, you learn some sort of lesson in that trauma that kept you alive in it. And that is kept in the neocortex, the front part of the brain, where we make up strategies and plans and remember things. If you get into an adrenalized state, that part of the brain shuts down and you resort to the deeper parts of the brain to react more effectively. So if you were a therapist and you're talking to me about my wartime experiences, as soon as we start talking about that, I get an adrenalized response because I go back into that fear, and the front part of the brain shuts off. So whatever work you do is going to be very ineffective. By being able to have compounds that turn off the adrenal system, now I have access to those memories, those experiences without the adrenal response, so I can actually do something with them. And so this one particular experience, I was in the middle of a journey, and I just felt the need to go outside, and I kind of go outside, and next thing I know, I'm like shadow boxing a tree, not hitting it, just shadow boxing a tree, and it was like getting warmed up. And then that led into every fight that I'd ever been in as a SEAL, I had to walk through physically. And if I didn't get it right, it was like that movie with Tom Cruise where
he starts over
reset.
again. Yeah.
Like, if I didn't move the right way that actually happened, it would reset and I'd have to start over.
So you were physically reliving every battle?
Every battle I'd ever been in.
Wow. In fact, you can remember them all.
You
could now if you wanted to.
Not even close.
Wow.
And my eyes were closed the whole time, and I'm moving. There's things like reloading an M60 machine gun. It's a belt-fed machine gun. I haven't done that since 2002. I mean, at this point, it'd been 12, 13 years, and I couldn't remember now what the steps were. I remember I got stuck there for a while because I didn't do it, and all of a sudden my hands did it the right way, and I got to move on.
Wow.
And so I go through every battle I'd ever been through. That took an hour and a half, 2 hours, they told me. I don't remember. And my eyes are closed, moving through the stuff, seeing all of it. Then this is where it gets even weirder. I had to go through every iteration of every battle I'd ever been through that I could think of. So there would be times where it would be the fights that actually happened. I went through all of those. But as an officer, my job is to stay 5 minutes ahead of the patrol, to think of the absolute worst scenarios that could happen and have a plan of reaction. The way our brains work, our brain doesn't know the difference between experiencing that in life and visualizing it with intent.
Right.
And so there would be times where I would get into situations where I'm visualizing the absolute worst things that could happen to the people I care about most, and they don't happen. But that becomes an open loop in the subconscious, because as soon as I get through that, I move to the next one and the next one.
So you had to relive those also.
What my brain did was required me to what if. So there's a couple ones that stick out. There's one, we were doing a patrol outside of Nazaria, and there's a 4-man patrol to set up a sniper element to do Overwatch for something. So we're having to walk through this area that was just a really bad area. And what I mean by really bad is, one, there's bad guys around, and two, we were at a significant tactical disadvantage. And I remember in that moment having to visualize the assaults that could come in, and I remember thinking, we're screwed. Like, we're screwed if they shoot us, if they start shooting. So the shooting starts now, we're screwed. We get through it, we didn't get shot at. We go through it again on the way back, we didn't get shot at. Mission's over, we just go on to the next mission. What I realized I got into that particular one, I went through every iteration that I could have thought of. Call in air support, call in the QRF, call in this, fight this direction, fight that direction. I must have been stuck in that fight, in this experience, for 45 minutes straight.
Wow.
And what I finally got to the point was I was dead. Like, if we would have taken fire in that, so there's nothing I could have done. There's a point on a bridge, there's a point on a ship, there's a point on an oil platform. There's about 6 of these where there is no way out. Wow. And what I realized in this, so I fought for, they told me 5.5 hours, something like that, straight, in the Florida heat with no water, not stopping, being 42 years old and whatnot, like rolling on the ground, running around. It was craziness.
Wow.
And what I realized, so the next day in integration, I'm processing this experience, is the traumas that caused me the most damage were not the ones where we fought, because when we actually fought, we debriefed the hell out of it and we survived. It was the traumas that were imagined that were the ones that I was carrying. Those were open loops of trauma that I've been carrying around. I had how many of those on 200 missions? I mean, there's 1,000 of them.
Wow.
And that was the weight I was carrying around.
So, couple of things. First, do you feel like there's a intelligence sort of baked into these medicines that can unlock that? I mean, how does it know to go in to unlock these things and make sure that you process them, that just directs you towards healing that otherwise is not available to you? And in my own assessment of the landscape of what's available to help somebody like you with something like that, I can't think of another tool that could do that. So, and it seems that, wow, well, that was kind of customized to you and your experience as a Navy SEAL commander, and it's for other people maybe had childhood sexual abuse, it's kind of so do you ascribe a certain intelligence into these plant medicines or psychedelics that can unlock those things?
I would say my belief system has been changing in my experiences, right? Before I started on this path, I knew there was nothing but me, right? And if I died, I'd turn to dust and that was the end of it. I completely believe something different now. Yeah. And part of the reason of that is I have an engineering brain and I'm always doing math in my head. And in these experiences over the last number of years, there's too many things that have occurred that are impossible. The odds are impossible. And if you're present enough, you can see those often. And when I got to like 5 of those things of impossible odds, sometimes 2 and 3 in one experience, that's where I'm like, there's more out there than just that, just me.
Right.
And so I think it's less of an intelligence in the medicine as much as it's a connection to universal truth, right? We can call that God, universe, source, whatever we want to talk about, whatever word you want to use for that. I believe that there is an energy, like I'm a physical manifestation of, you can say God's love or universal energy or source energy. Again, I don't care what word you use in this moment, in this time. And at some point that energy is going to leave me and I'll turn to dust, but that's just the physical body. I believe that same energy is what provides truth and intelligence anywhere. And I think that's the same thing we're talking about. It's a connection to the divine that exists in that medicine, that truth, or that energy enables me to get closer to that universal truth. I don't know if that made sense.
No, it does. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense. That just it's more of the mechanistic. The machine's done. I'm done, as compared to saying no. There's a source to all this, and we can connect to it, and it can have some pretty amazing experiences when connected. So now this kind of segues, because I know that you understand trauma like very few people do, and you understand the entrepreneur, and I think you started to identify parallels between an entrepreneur or CEO, and how their trauma can become sort of this inhibitory aspect of their achievement in life. So how did all this translate for you, and how do you see your experiences being applied to high-level executive performance?
So I guess before we go into that, the end of my psychedelic experience was I had made a ton of progress through. When I mean a ton, I mean life completely different, trajectory of life completely different in about a year. And then what I noticed was a bit of a cycle going on of having an experience, feeling a lot better, seeing something, and then going back, there's a cost to doing this work,
Right.
Neurochemically, and that cost can produce a lower feeling, which then drives into the next experience. So I felt this almost like a loop of staying in the same loop. But through that experience, towards the end of it, I was asked by a guy that I had sat with a number of times that I had no idea was a veteran as well. And he had seen such change in me that he asked for some help. And in helping him, I was able to me, I didn't come up with this. I just, through the use of these medicines, through being very intentional with what I was doing and having an engineering brain, being able to identify what process I went through to be able to heal, I was able to consolidate that into another process to help free people from trauma. And it was through this request of a friend that, again, in another experience. And that's where, again, to me, the experiences gave me access to truth that is beyond my grasp outside of them, right? Getting closer to universal truth, divine truth, God, whatever you want to say. And in that, I got some unique insights into what causes trauma and what we have to do to release it. And in doing that, kind of consolidated a process. And I started using that same process on me and some other veterans. But what was interesting is once I healed most of my SEAL stuff, I still experiencing post-traumatic stress. And post-traumatic stress is when you create stress in your current situation based on traumas that happened in your past. But I cleared all the SEAL stuff. And that's when I realized that the post-traumatic stress I was dealing with now came from my entrepreneurial journey. And that all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait a minute. Trauma is you have a traumatic experience, and in that traumatic experience, you create some sort of lesson. Like the point of a trauma is lesson. If you have a traumatic experience, you don't live, it's all over. If you live, you learn something that enabled you to live. Something becomes true in your world, and that's what runs the subconscious. In doing that, when my environment shifts and I'm no longer in the traumatic environment, but I'm acting as if I was, I create stress in my world. My example's easy. Everyone's trying to kill me, everything's gonna go to crap. Like, that was true for 10 years. When I acted in that truth as a SEAL, everything went well. When I acted in that truth with a 2-year-old and a wife that loves me and a budding business, it went horribly. Right? So post-traumatic stress is when you create stress today based on living in traumas from the past.
Right.
And it's all in the story that the subconscious makes up to get through the traumatic experience. And being able to identify that and create a new story is a critical aspect to healing trauma. So I started to see that anytime you perceive you don't have control, you experience trauma. And as an entrepreneur, that's our life all the time. And so ultimately, it's taken me longer to unwind the traumas that I gave myself in my entrepreneurial journey than as a SEAL. And we've been working with large organizations optimizing performance for years. And we always saw this thing that happened. We would get the business in shape, we'd get the teams optimized, and they would grow, and then stop. And there's no reason for them to stop growing. And what we finally saw was that the unresolved traumas of the CEO was the biggest inhibitor of an organization's growth all the time. And that was, to me, I still find that earth-shattering, right? That a trauma established from a CEO when he was 5 or 6, who doesn't identify as having trauma, because most of us have been lied to our whole life thinking that trauma is war, sexual assault, loss of a loved one. But the common thread between all those things is a perceived loss of control. Well, if you've ever had a perception you didn't control something, you experienced a little bit of trauma. And so once we start opening our mind to all of those times that we perceive that we didn't control something, and that is where we establish trauma, all of us are traumatized. And CEOs more than anyone else. And so someone who doesn't identify as having experienced trauma will never try to fix it, which is why the organizations will never grow. So we started applying the same battlefield principles that we were healing spec op soldiers with to CEOs, and we're seeing 5, 10x growth very quickly.
That's amazing. So is it, in your mind now, almost patterned or predictable that you take a CEO, you put them through your process now, and get them to open up and identify these traumas and work with them to heal these traumas, and there's breakthrough growth, or there's always like this next level for them that...
Something even more, this to me is another kind of earth-shattering thing. People had asked me, what is the common trait among SEALs? Like, you have 135 guys start, 11 get through. Why did those 11 get through? What's the common thing? And you couldn't, I mean, it's the breadth of different guy that gets through is amazing. You have fat guy from Oklahoma, can barely swim, makes it through, and the triathlete superstar doesn't. Like, it doesn't make sense. And what I realized is the common trait among all SEALs is you can't be quite right in the head. Like, you literally have to be abnormal. You have to be somewhat crazy, because what they're going to ask you to do, a normal person says no, or hell no. Like, not a chance in hell I'm going to do that. Right. So that required some sort of early childhood trauma to establish the need to self-regulate at that level and the drive to do something that no one else will do. Well,
true for CEOs too, right?
Exactly,
yeah.
Right? If you look at what it takes to be a successful CEO, normal people say no. You know, I'd rather go to the bar and play fantasy football than do that. And that's also why, 95% of businesses fail within the first 5 years, based on the fact that people think they want to be a CEO until they see what it takes to do it, and they're like, no. But those of us that stay in it, we had to be abnormal. And that abnormality is always driven by an early childhood trauma.
It reminds me of a phrase in one of my companies that a consultant said to me one time. He said, the founder's strength is the company's weakness.
Yep.
In a sense that, you know, that whatever that little thing is that drives them to create out of nothing, right? You know, because that's the entrepreneur. You know, there's a difference probably between the startup entrepreneurial CEO and kind of the Harvard Business School CEO, you know, that takes a scaled company and works with it. Still, you know, a lot of stress there. But when you're starting from nothing and you're pushing through brick walls to create something, yeah, that's a certain psychological thing. And I guess looking at maybe the virtue of psychedelics, because, you know, looking at how it healed your trauma, but then you discovered, hey, there's a whole
nother set
of trauma that I didn't deal with, and that many people have adverse early, you know, events in their childhood that they're probably unaware of. But psychedelics could be a tool to discover that and to move through that and then to become, you know, somebody healed.
Right, and so getting into that point, by the nature of being largely successful in business, I know now it's 100%. I've never seen one that is not. Some sort of early childhood trauma that drives it and creates the resilience to it and the need to be in this world. And therefore, everyone that has seen success in business or wants to will eventually hit the ceiling. Like you said, right? The greatest strength is the weakness.
Right.
At some point, you're going to get to a point where your trauma limits your growth. And that's what we are seeing with organizations that were optimized, firing on all cylinders. The CEO will either limit it or it's self-destructive. And that's where you see the same thing in a lot of entrepreneurial stories of they go up to here and then they can't kill it. They go up a little higher and then they kill it. They go up a little higher and they kill it. And I call it a bracket strategy, in that you're going to always have enough drive and motivation to never be in the basement, but you're never going to truly have success, or else I wouldn't know what to do. Right. So we're constantly bouncing off of this ceiling and making sure we never go into the basement. And that piece of what's driving all of that is subconscious. And it's also trauma-based. So my subconscious is going to hide it from me. Therefore, normal therapy will never work. Absolutely can't. There's not enough talking, there's not enough self-development, there's not enough conferences you could go to solve this, because this is deeply held into the subconscious, and that's part of the power of the psychedelics, of being able to, one, turn off the adrenal system so that you can actually get to the scary stuff and not have the alarm bells go off and turn off your brain, and to be able to open up the consciousness to be open to a new way of seeing the world. Because your subconscious is 100% convinced that the way that we've been doing it for the last 40 years got us here.
Yeah.
So we can't let go of that, because I'd rather be unhappy, unfulfilled, but safe than happy and fulfilled and not know that I actually know what's on the other side. Because the subconscious doesn't know what to do there.
Right. So I guess kind of like, summarize all this and bring it together. PTSD isn't just for soldiers.
It's for all of us, unfortunately.
Yeah. And typically, I think for the most part, talk type therapy, with all due respect to people who do that work, but it seems to be inadequate to really handle it, especially in any kind of a timely manner. I mean, you're looking at years and years, and maybe there's incremental progress. And sometimes maybe breakthroughs, but my view of it has been that it hasn't really been that effective, from what I've read and understood about it. And that when we're looking at now business and productivity and so on, that we still are self-limited because of traumas that we've had in the entrepreneurial world, in the high-performance world of anything. And then I guess it would extrapolate, wouldn't it, also to our political leaders? I mean, I have to imagine that we got people in positions of real importance and power who also are suffering and struggling. I mean, my experience from this series is saying, boy, what would happen if every legislator and executive branch member in Washington, D.C. went through some psychedelic experiences? Yeah. I think it could be profoundly good for, right now the polarization's at all-time high, partisanism is at all-time high, it's very dysfunctional, and it's just fueled by a lot of negativity and vile energy. And man, what might happen if these people went through psychedelic experiences? So are you seeing that there could be a global impact from this type of work?
I look at it on two fronts. The one front is just the trauma front, right? Like, if there's any message that I would want people to that are listening and watching this here, is that like you said, trauma is not just for the special operations soldiers. All of us have experienced trauma, and the traumas that we experience are running us primarily, and they're causing most of the dysfunction in our life. And unfortunately, you will be blind to what it's doing because it's keeping you alive.
Right.
And that's where you need help. So that's the first part. The second part is that when it comes to leveraging tools like the psychedelics, the tools are very useful if done in the right way in the safe environment. And with the popularity of it, I've started to see it not used in an effective way. And so my next big warning is be careful, right? Be careful. And the way I always look at it is dosing is the most important, tied to the environment you're in, meaning how is it what environment, actual environment, and what's the process. And the last part of it is who is around you.
Right.
Because in a big experience with 100 people laying on the floor, all these traumas are flying around, and you might grab onto someone else's in an open state. And so be careful in that. The impact, though, is massive. And for us, we've decided to focus on curing the trauma of CEOs and leaders, because we have two big effects there. One, we get to let people that have dedicated their life to producing something that benefits more be free finally. Two, we're able to help the economy by making it go better. But the biggest one, the three, is as a CEO, when they change dramatically, that impacts not only their life, their family's life, it impacts the lives of everyone within their organization and their families. And so for us, it's the greatest way that we can have the biggest impact, by producing freedom for these people.
Well, First of all, thank you for sharing all this. Obviously, you've given a ton of thought to it, and you have your own personal experience around it. And I think looking at these particular applications of how psychedelics can impact people's lives in the world, it's a unique perspective to see. So thanks for sharing all that with us.
No, it's been my pleasure, and I just want to express my a source of gratitude, in that for someone that was completely lost, knew that I would have ended my life wrecking a car, falling out of the sky, if I wasn't able to have. I remember that first experience, and there's a point in that experience when I saw the change in Brooks's face, and I had hope for the first time that I wasn't going to be where I've been and unable to move. And so being able to bring that message to a lot of people is a huge service. So I know this would have shortened my path to being in a better place. So thank you for what you're doing.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I find it fascinating when you take someone who is an Annapolis grad, has an engineering degree, is a former Navy SEAL commander, and has all these experiences in combat, and then has to try to process all this in the unique way that only that type of person can. Well, that was what Larry brought to the table when we had this interview. And again, it's just another context and perspective to show you how powerful psychedelics can really be in people's lives. Okay, this next interview is with who is probably the most unique person in the whole series. This is Jerry Powell. Jerry's story is almost not to be believed, but he tells it so well, and every word of it is true. He is the founder of the Rhythmia Life Advancement Center in Costa Rica, and when you hear the story of what got him there and what his past was, I think it's going to just blow your mind. We spent a week at Rhythmia, and it was an extraordinary experience. And every day I would see Jerry, and he'd be walking around, and again, he has that kind of twinkle in his eye, that smile on his face, and he's got a purpose, a real purpose that's very, very obvious. And his story is just dumbfounding. So I want you to tune in here. You're going to enjoy this experience, and you're going to learn a lot by this interview with Jerry Powell. Jerry, I heard your story earlier today, and I have to say it's almost impossible to keep my attention that long, and you did it, and I could have gone twice as long, and I would have not been bored for half a second. And I know every word of it was true.
Yeah.
So give me a quick thumbnail of kind of your life and like how you got into doing what you're doing today.
So I was a problem kid in a very, very strict family, a little violent in there as well, you know. And I became a violent kid, as a violent kid, very mad kind of kid, but slippery, like ultra smooth, but hated, like I was mad. Yeah. And tough. I was always in fights and problems and just unhappy. And I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew that I was different because I was always in trouble, always constantly in trouble with everyone around me. And as my life progressed, the troubles got bigger. And I got kicked out of schools and wound up in jail, you know, wound up in jail for being accused of some things that I did, actually did them. And through a miracle, I got acquitted. And I promised I was going to do something with my life. And the only thing I knew based on my upbringing was that if you made money, you were a good person. So I tried to make money, and I was okay at it. There's people that have made a lot more money than me, but I was okay at it. I became a millionaire in my 20s. I took a company public in my 30s and had a big net worth, and then went bankrupt in the, well, I didn't go bankrupt, but the company went bankrupt in the dot-com crash, and I lost everything I had. And I started another company at 38 that I sold when I was 42 for a tick under 90 million. But during that process, I became a really terrible guy. I hated myself. I was suicidal, alcoholic. But alcoholic is never the thing. It's a byproduct of the thing, yeah? Right. Alcoholic, drug addict, sex addict, general, just a guy who's upset with everyone. I didn't like anyone. I liked my 2 kids, kind of. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of. Which made me feel like that's love, because it was so different than But, and I love them beyond words, my children, I was out of time. My wife had left me of 20 years, and rightfully so. I was the worst husband, I would say probably the worst husband I've ever seen, I think. And that's saying something, because I knew some bad ones, You know what I mean? But I was right up there with terrible. I was done with life. I was done. And I went to Passages Malibu. I met this guy, Dr. Jeff.
That's a rehab center?
It's a rehab center in California. And I met this fella, Dr. Jeff. And the guy saved my life. He's just, I don't know, one of the best people I ever met. And I met him there. And I was in therapy with him for 5 years. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it. But I had been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and attachment disorder. And when those 2 things meet up, the person usually commits suicide. And so Dr. Jeff promised my ex-wife that he'd dedicate his life to keeping me alive for my kids. Crazy thing.
Wow. Wow.
So I didn't know. I just thought I wasn't getting better. And the whole time they weren't even trying to fix me. They're trying to just make sure that I lived because it was unfixable. What was wrong? And that's interesting too, because after plant medicine, I took the that test, and I had nothing after plant medicine. But I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, so that was the story. And then I got really sad again, and I wound up going and doing plant medicine in Costa Rica, a place called Buena Vista, about 2 hours from here. And I had the most amazing experience on the Iboga. I saw
it was Iboga.
I saw that my grandfather molested me.
Well, while you're in the journey?
Yeah, I actually went to the moon, and it sounds crazy, and the moon sent me to the house, my grandfather's house, and I watched me, which is crazy. I watched it happening, where you could move this way and still see it. So that opened my mind up to everything is constantly being filmed from every angle of our lives. Crazy that I could see a replay of this from anywhere. Just
as a third-party observer.
Yeah, just amazing stuff. And it was terribly upsetting and liberating at the same time. I looked at it and it explained everything. It explained why I hated people, why I was an alcoholic, a drug addict, a sex addict, why I couldn't connect to a woman, why I couldn't connect to a guy, why my thoughts were so scrambled, and everything was painful. The crazy thing was I managed to be reasonably successful in business under all that, because it's all I had. So that was the only thing, was the business thing. And and it just got super, super, super sad. And then when I had this experience, I swear to you, people, people that haven't done it don't know what the light switch is. But the next day it was like somebody turned on the lights.
Wow.
That it was just, it's this way and then it's this way. And it's hard to explain, because in conventional therapy, it's never that. It's this way, then it's this way, then it's this way. And 30 years later, it might be this way. But it goes from here to here in no time. And
have you ever done a thought experiment? Had you not found plant medicine, had you not gone and done that Iboga session, where you'd be right now?
Dead.
You sure?
Guaranteed that's where I was going.
Wow.
Guaranteed. The 2 guys that I got the house with in Malibu were both dead. And they're younger than me. And,
these are people that were in the same addiction centers?
Yeah, wealthier, much wealthier than me.
Wow.
Both dead.
Wow.
Yeah, so I know that's where I was going, I knew that's where I was going. And that's why I think there's so many people that are living in this desperation of childhood trauma that is ruling their lives. They know something's wrong, but they can't point to it and they can't fix it. That's true desperation. That is really desperation. Half of them are working at banks, and not banks, but some banks. They're working in regular jobs, and they're in hell. They're in hell. and this stuff is available to people to get them out of it, and it takes some guts to do this stuff. It does, but man, is it worth it? You know, it's really, really worth it.
Well, the stakes, especially for you, were quite high.
Oh my God, yeah, it's life and death. You know, and for all of us it is, because if you ever watch someone who dies with regret, it was life or death the whole time.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
life or death the whole time, and they missed it.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. As a matter of fact, I'd rather go up front in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so many people are living life and not living it, and that's the beautiful thing, I think, with the medicine. At least to me, that once you die in the medicine, and you're no longer afraid of dying, you can actually live.
What does it mean to die in the medicine?
One of the most common typed experience is a death experience. It's when you leave your body and you really are leaving. You even see the maloka, you're going, you're dying. And then this calmness, first it's panic, and it goes from panic to this calmness. And it's a calmness that's like, I don't know, it's like everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. And then from that, you can live life. If you know that's what's there,
Right.
then you might as well start having fun here. You know, having fun tasting it, smelling it, being involved in it, not just using it to get something, but being in it, you know? And that's when you see people that have been to a place like this or places like this, that when you see them a year from now, they're a different person.
How many times have you died in medicine?
I have 277, I think, journeys, and I would say I died 20 times.
Wow. And is it consistent each time, the peaceful?
I get different places, you know, like it depends what you're dying to and where you're going and things like that, you know, so I get different places. I get some scary places, and the scarier the place, it'll go through, it goes in a wave, right? It goes from scary to super peaceful.
Wow.
It's all in here, you know, it's all, you know, things too, and I don't know what it is. I listen to some of these guys talking about plant medicine. They're talking in terms of alkaloids, and I don't even go anywhere near it because it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
To me, you know, like, we're talking about outer space that's not outer space. What the hell do you know? Like, I don't know, what are we talking about? To sit here and diagram it, I couldn't even begin to think what that looks like.
Do you agree with the Joseph Campbell's statement, in the cave you fear the most is the treasure you seek?
Always,
Yeah.
always, and I love him.
Yeah.
He's amazing, you know. I was in the Catholic school system, and actually I had a great devotion to Jesus, even though it didn't, you know, outpicture that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I did. I would go to extra church. I was crazy like that. But when the first time that I saw a Joseph Campbell VHS, because it was VHS times when I came upon that, I was like, oh my God, you know, I missed the whole thing. That this fella knows something, you know?
So how did it come to be that you ended up developing rhythmia?
I know this is probably the part where I get committed, but the moon told me to do it. In the Bwiti tradition of Iboga, the Bwiti shaman that come out of Gabon, they all generally get you to one of two places, to the sun or the moon. And when you're on either, they don't talk, they type. So there's some instrument that they type, the moon and the sun. And that's why I'm going to tell you, and I'm not, you know, in my theory, like, tradition is like pure pressure from dead people, right? Like, I don't really deal with it, you know what I mean? But in the Iboga, it's really real. So if you get a real good Bwiti trained shaman, he can get you to these places. It's much more static than ayahuasca. There's places and things to do, and you know, there's actual places that are out there that are the same to other people.
Wow.
So, you know, I loved it. So I got to the moon and I fell in love with the moon. It's the first feminine love that I had that didn't have strings.
And did you feel physically present on the moon?
Yeah, I swear I was there. I swear to God I was there. That's how dumb I am, but I swear I was there. You know?
Okay.
I really believe I was there.
And you sensed the female presence?
Yeah, she was there. She's there. She is that. Yeah. And it was female energy without attachment, without strings, it's just pure love. And I was just gone by it. It's, even thinking about it make you cry.
Yeah.
Like it's that kind of, that's what's over there.
Right.
It's beautiful, beautiful stuff, right? So I was sold. So she told me what to do. She typed out what to do, and I just did it.
Typed out mean you don't get a voice. You're like reading text coming on the screen.
And here's the crazy thing: those journeys are recorded. They're recorded on a thing, and the shaman asks you, "What did she say?" And then you say you're reading it.
Reading it.
And then later on, you transcribe it or re-listen to it, because a lot of times you forget what was going on during the thing. You go like, "Oh my God, look what she said this, she said that." Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so she told you to start Rhythmia?
Yep.
Did you ever question it?
No.
Wow.
I did after I did it. I can tell you the truth on that.
Yeah, good.
I lost faith after I started it. After I started it, I lost faith. Nobody showed up.
You mean after you started Rhythmia? Oh, so you went through, made the investment, did...
Yeah. I did everything. Opened the doors, and nobody was there. And I was like, she screwed me. I thought, you know what? She's mad at me from all the shit that I did to her daughters down here.
You thought this
that's
was
what
penance?
I thought. The moon got me back, And I got mad for a while. I was almost a half a year. I was like, I'm going to actually go against plant medicine because it tells people to do things that are wrong for them and da-da-da.
Wow.
I was going to go that way, and then took another journey, and she just said, be patient. Just be patient. Be patient. And on my honor, 100%, like, people started showing up, and then people started telling people. The next thing you know, you have a ton of people showing up, and it got good.
Did you ever try to ascribe any meaning to why the delayed start, or why it was slow in the beginning? Is there something you had to learn?
I don't think that time is the same. I don't even think we know what time is. I think that they know what time is.
Right.
And probably in all of our development, there's this thing that we want everything when we want it, and it's never right. Like there's this part of the human condition is this impatience, and that's one of the things she tries to smack out of you. Is that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm still impatient as hell. Like I'm very impatient. I'm impatient about almost everything. So yeah, it's been wild. Yeah.
When you were developing Rhythmia, how long between the time you got the message and Rhythmia opened, and did you ever have doubts along the way?
Tons, because I took the first journey in July 4th.
What year?
2014. I closed on this in the last week of 2014.
Wow.
We didn't open the doors until 2016. And then we opened to nobody. And I thought, man, what is going on here? And the thing was, I kept people employed for that year. We had 70 employees.
70?
Wow. So I just kept 70 people on payroll for a year, and most of them are still here. Like they're tremendously great employees. That was a good thing to do. But I next thing you know, that was supposed to cost $2.5 million. I was upside down 10 million.
Wow.
And I was like, that's a lot. And I had gone through a divorce, paid my taxes, and I was like, where you're at, right?
Yeah.
And I just got, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. And I was wrong. I was just wrong.
So then it started getting busier.
It started getting busier, and not only did it start getting busier, but I saw what was happening to the people that went through this thing. As she set it up, because the thing is, I took 45 journeys, and there were about 450 answers to questions that shaped how this works.
So the journeys were progressive, and like once that set was handled, you go on to the next set.
Yeah, I'd say food. Like, let's talk about food. Like, what should I do?
Did you go in with the intention each time to
always to figure out? Because she told me I had to take 45 more journeys. So there was basically 450 questions that laid how this goes.
Wow.
And so, but I saw when I started watching the people that went through it, I saw something that I've never seen. I've seen what happened to me happen to them. That experience got mimicked.
Yes.
And then they'd be
So you weren't
crying.
an outlier. You were,
No,
oh,
it
wow.
was almost like a system, a system. It was it was systematized. So it's like plant medicine with a system,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I hear 450 journeys,
Questions.
Yeah.
45
45 journeys,
45
450
Iboga
tuitions.
journeys.
Yeah. Oh, it's 45. That was all in Iboga.
That's on Iboga. Then 277 on
ayahuasca. Is there a toll physically? I mean, this has got to be depleting certain resources.
Yeah.
It's got to be heavy on the nervous system to some degree. Is there full recovery every time? Or?
Yeah, I'm tough in that way, that I can journey and then go to work.
Yeah.
So I'm maybe I'm used to it.
Yeah.
And some guys can do a lot more than me. I see guys that do, and some people do much less, that the medicine rocks them.
Wow.
I would never say, I'm going to tell you what my own belief is, that for most people, do a program and don't do another one for a year. Because to really integrate, I was doing something else. I was constructing something that, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But if I'm in regular life, do a journey, do a series, do a program, and then integrate it for a year. Integrate it for a year, and then do another one,
Yeah.
and then integrate it for a year, and make it religious.
The integration is critical?
The most important thing.
Really?
I see people that get stuck in the ceremony to ceremony thing, and it becomes, once you've really purged on ayahuasca, once you've really done it, it's not the most attractive thing you don't yearn for that again.
Right.
But people do get addicted to the new insight. So new insight, but an insight without taking it out of the ceremony and into your life is worthless.
Right.
It's like seeing a beautiful piece of cake and just seeing it, smelling it, and then passing it on. This whole thing is about, okay, just learn that love is all there is. Now let me go live love is all there is for a bit,
Yes.
That's the deal. And it can get wild too, because certain people just have this quest. They want to know more and more and more and more, and there's not enough ayahuasca in the world to answer all of one person's possible questions,
Right.
because it keeps going different places, different planes, different, it's too much,
Yeah. So you started out in Iboga and then got the whole recipe for this place from Iboga, but you're doing ayahuasca,
Yes.
which is what you do here, right?
Yeah.
So why ayahuasca and not Iboga?
Two different things. The first thing is the medicine told us, so Iboga said to use ayahuasca,
Okay.
for two reasons. Number one, that ayahuasca is gentler on people by and large. Not that you can't have a rougher experience on one than the other, but by and large it's gentler. And the second thing is the Iboga done the way that we like, the Bwiti way. It requires about one shaman for every 3 people because they're guided.
Yeah.
So in order to do it in an expansive way, and we've had about 8,500 people through the doors so far. So and all of those have been on ayahuasca, and they all mimic the same experience. I honestly believe I could get something very close to it on mushrooms or very close, but I like the ayahuasca because of the purge.
Because of the purge.
Yeah.
And when you talk about purge, you're talking about vomiting.
Yeah, and then vomiting or diarrhea or sweating or shaking, but it's such an integral part of the experience, and it's so important. It's so important. And
See, a lot of people probably, that's the thing that maybe they fear the most.
yeah, they do, and it draws them in too.
Yeah.
Because that thing, the Joe Campbell thing, there's something to it. There's a cherry in there.
Yeah. Is there a premise around purging, what it represents?
There's the traditional ideas behind it, and what we believe, what the moon said, is that it's the physical removal of the thing that's standing between you and your intention. She has it concise,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I believe.
Wow.
I believe that, yeah.
So walk me through then the arc of the experience, because this is sort of an all or nothing scenario, meaning you sign up, you don't come here for a day or two, you
No.
sign up for a 1-week program.
Yes.
So can you give maybe the highlights of the
Yeah,
arc
sure.
of the experience?
So you come in and you have an introduction, and then you have medical clearance
Medical clearance meaning that you get assessed to make sure you're okay to do it.
to do
Yeah.
plant medicine.
Okay.
And then you have breath work on the first night. And then on the second day, you have classes. And then the classes lead into ceremony.
Ceremony meaning that's when the ayahuasca happens.
To drink ayahuasca the first night. And then the next day there are classes. And then classes plus an integration from the day before, and then ceremony. And the same thing on the third day, and the same thing on the fourth day.
Okay.
And then they have classes, dance of liberation, we do meditation, and there's yoga every day.
Yes.
And breath work and all the different things. And so the last 2 days are breath work days and dance days, and people get to integrate. And then we have closing group and 2 more classes by Dr. Jeff that are largely about integration. And we have a program, web-based program for integration after people go home. And then we have a closing circle, and then they're gone. And then as they're going, 100 more are checking in, and it just goes on and on. Yeah.
Wow. What's it like, 100 people in a room all journeying together?
So interesting. So we keep data on everything. If you see, there's FOBs that people carry, and they swipe in and swipe out of everything.
Yep.
And there's such interesting thing because math is everywhere. It's everywhere. You can't get rid of it, And the math shows what optimum people in that Maloka is, which is about 94, the optimum. And then helpers to guest is another metric. And it's funny, you would think the more helpers, the better, and it's not true.
Wow.
So there's this metric, this number, where it's the right amount of helpers for the right amount of guests. And what it does, it leaves people a little bit where they have to rely on themselves, but there's help around. So we have the highest amount of helpers per guest of any larger center that we know of in the world. And we know the right numbers, and we know what classes are the most important, and we know the combination of foods, the combination of experiences, like what works, and then what holds. So I don't want people to think that I didn't even go to college, right? So I didn't finish high school, so I'm not a guy that really understands data, but every business that I've had ran on data, and the data were the selects that I did, and I look at it my own way, and I draw my own conclusions from it, and I track everything.
Wow.
So I'm trying to figure it out,
So you talk about, because I see you do a lot of analytics and you present them, and you have one of your data points is around, I think you call it miracle rates, or how do you characterize that?
Miracle rate.
Miracle rate. So
I never thought I'd have a business where the main metric was miracle rate.
So, well, let's start. What is the miracle rate that you track right now?
95.12.
Okay, 95.12. Okay, so basically over 9.5 out of 10 people that show up, or out of a group, 95 plus,
0.1.
out of the 100.
Yeah.
What do you mean by a miracle?
Well, it's self-reported on them, and we happen to believe that the miracle, either everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle, right?
Einstein.
But we do believe that there's a particular type of miracle that's being reported here, which is an ancient soul merger. So we believe it's a soul merger, and most people see it as a soul merger.
And when you say see it, are you saying figuratively, or they literally see it?
Literally. Most
in
people
a journey.
see it in the journey as a soul merger.
Wow. So you're saying that 95% of the people, 95+% of the people, while they're here in a journey, at some point see their soul merge into their body?
In some way.
Yeah.
So it can be they see their younger self come to them and go in. They can actually see soul. They can see heart. They can see all kinds of stuff. But it's all different versions of the same thing.
Yeah, so it becomes something that is directly experiential as compared to kind of qualitative, saying, "Oh no, I felt like my life changed."
But there's a lot of that too.
I'm sure.
There's a lot of that too, and so if I were doing it, and if I had to analyze the composition of that, I would say probably 40% see the merger, and the rest have something else that happens that they perceive as a miracle.
Wow.
Because you can't tell someone they didn't have a miracle, right?
Yeah, right.
No, that wasn't it,
Yeah, and it's not saying, did your life get better? It's saying, did you have a miracle?
Yes,
that's
exactly.
That's a high bar.
It's a big bar.
Wow. So vision of Rhythmia, at least to date? Do you feel like you've fulfilled on it? Do you feel like you are where you should be exactly at this point in time?
Yeah, I feel that we're right where we should be. And what I would really love to see is more people doing businesses like this. There's so many bars, and there's so many nightclubs, and there's so many, things that are just time wasters, and fast food places, and and the world needs things like this, things that are real breathwork places, yoga places. I love seeing that, and I think plant medicine has such a place in the world, and I actually think it's a conduit to world peace. And it's coming back. It's coming around.
Does that concern you? Because we're seeing it's explosive right now. I mean, suddenly people are self-styled shaman in Hollywood, running ayahuasca ceremonies on the weekends. So do you worry that might start to destroy the goodness that this could be?
I'm not so worried about that because there's such intelligence in the medicine that even if somebody self-administered it, it's better than not having anything. So I'm not a purist. There's a ton of people that are out there, and the Peruvian folks think the Colombian folks are doing it wrong, who thinks the Ecuadorian folks are doing it wrong. There's this whole thing, Catholic Protestant thing going on. And they're old wars. They're old wars. There's brujas and all these different. I don't get anywhere near that.
Is it surprising to you that they have these conflicts? They're supposed to be evolved souls that see past the distinctions of tradition. I love the way you describe tradition, but that they should be like, oh, we're all one, trying to help heal people and heal the planet. So it sort of contradicts.
It is contradictory, and the top of each one, like the quality taitas, the quality maestros, are all of the peace mind. It seems to be lower down the ladder in people who are newer to it and maybe not yet healed enough themselves to do it, and that creates all these other side wars and these crazy things, and there's competitors that don't want you to do well, and it's just, it's like, because underneath this there's commerce, right? And so once that happens, everything changes as well, right?
and that is kind of the interesting thing, because you're at the crossroads here between business, spirituality, and psychology.
Yes.
Right? And it's kind of a weird brew that when they intersect, it's like, okay, how do you make this all work? And you seem to have done that here, which is, I think, pretty stunning.
Yeah, I find the whole industry funny because you usually have non-business people running businesses. And that creates chaos. It just does.
Yes.
And you can see how they run their business with it. And so I come in, and I am a business guy. I'm an organizational guy. In working hand in hand with people who are not organizational minded at all. And that's where the challenge is in this thing. So in the beginning, it didn't work for me. I'm like, you're not. 1 and 1 is still 2. You got to show up on time. It was driving me crazy.
They can't show up. I wasn't in the flow. I waited
exactly.
another half.
The vibe wasn't right. The vibe wasn't right. I got people waiting. The vibe isn't right. And I'm like, this is things I never heard before. People say before. So we taught each other. Like the staff here taught me, and I taught them. And so we have this middle ground, and that's when it starts working. And they really have trained me. I'm a different guy. I used to, even when I first had the medicine, I would pop off 50 times a day, like mad. Like this is not, like, just insane stuff. And I've calmed down a lot, a real lot, I still do. I still have like a monthly spin out. But it's not real crazy, It's mildly crazy.
And you can laugh about it.
I do laugh, and everybody laughs at it, because it's not even real. It's a aftershock of something. Are
you going to do this the rest of your life?
I pray I can. I pray. This is I always, when I was a younger guy, if I had one of a business, I wanted 100 of them. And I don't want 2. I'm in love with this thing, and I'm in love with what happens every week. I get to relive that. I honestly feel like the luckiest guy alive. I do. I really do.
Do you believe that you were put on this planet for this particular purpose?
I don't know, I don't know if I was. I would say it's a perfect fit for me, so I don't know if, I honestly have an opinion. I think I was the next asshole there with the money. And the medicine said, oh, this asshole will try, we'll try him, he's silly enough to do it, And that's really what I think. And because I was the least likely guy.
Yeah.
I curse every third word. I have a temper. I have really bad manners, I was not educated, I'm not the guy you would have picked for this, for a spiritual endeavor, It's just funny, I think. Yeah.
But in some respects, you're perfect for it.
In a strange way,
Yeah.
Maybe in 1 out of 10 ways, maybe,
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. Were there along the way, like finding this property, for example, were there things that just seemed kind of like, some people call them synchronicities?
Yeah, there was.
So like they'd come up and say, wow, it just seems like it's all happening.
That was part of the tender trap. It all happened too easy.
Yeah.
And then when the door shut and the closing occurred, and a year later nobody showed up, I thought, oh, I just got screwed. Screwed by the moon.
Well, if you're gonna get screwed.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's the future vision?
Well, I would like to extend this into these like pod communities, these communities of like 50 houses at a time that have a maloka at the center and that do yoga and meditation and a couple plant ceremonies a month, a real community. And I believe ever since COVID, in a general awakening, not wokeness, a real general awakening, that this focus on community, this focus on friendship, this focus on family, this focus on really what counts is starting to happen again. And people are fleeing urban environments that are away from nature to get around more natural settings with community, with family, with this. I think those things are going to be the way of the future. I really do. I think not for all, not every, but a big percentage of the population has had it.
Yeah.
They've had it with everything. And I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican, they both had it.
Right.
They've had it. And I think it's time. I think that's the time of people really starting to become aware of it.
Well, I have to say, first of all, thank you for letting us bring a crew here
I love having you.
record all this and document it all. And thanks for your hospitality, and your story I just think is very compelling, and I'm sure it's inspired a lot of people already and will continue to do so. So thanks for all this.
We appreciate you guys coming and filming, and I know it's a haul for you to get here, so it's very appreciative. We're super appreciative.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I wasn't lying about Jerry's story, was I? It's just so incredible. And to see where he's landed in his life and the work that he's doing week in, week out through Rhythmia and how it's impacting the world, something that's just extraordinary. So he's a colorful character. I was really glad that we can share this interview with you. Next up, you're in for a very special treat. We took 6 people. We went to Costa Rica with a film crew, and we tracked them as they went through a series of ayahuasca ceremonies at the Rhythmia Life Advancement Center. So this is kind of a special thing. We've been talking abstractly about psychedelics in all these different interviews, but now we're taking 6 people, 6 very different people, and we start out by asking them, why are they there? What are they interested in learning, or what do they want their experience to be? And then we actually track them day by day through their experience. And then a month after they left Rhythmia and came back to the United States, we sit down again and look at where their lives are. And I will tell you, it's radical how different it is for different people. So this is sort of the real world, sort of reality TV side of Psychedelics Revealed. So here we are, I'm about to introduce you to 6 very special, very interesting, and I will say very daring human beings. Let's go in. Dory, I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. First, let's acknowledge the fact that you're the wife of our producer, Jeff Hayes, my partner. And we're here down at Rhythmia. But you currently are dealing with some health challenges. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm having a reoccurrence of my stage 4 ovarian cancer. We found out that it had come back in June, July of last year. Mm-hmm. And so that's my current state.
So you had stage 4 ovarian cancer. You healed from that basically, and how long before you had the recurrence?
Well, we did standard of care. They never really tell you you're healed. Right. They give you, you have to be 5 years. Mm-hmm. So I was NED, which is no evidence detected. Right. For about, well, they would say 17 months because that was about the time that I finally went in, but we knew probably 3 or 4 months before I actually made it into the doctor to get re-diagnosed. Yeah. So I maybe made it about 12 to 13 months.
What was that like psychologically to find that out?
It was rough.
Yeah.
You know, I really wanted to believe that I would be one and done. Mm-hmm. And even knowing the statistics of this type of cancer, I just felt I was still feeling really good. And the only indication is I could feel tumors.
Wow. Well, you talking about your past a little bit, you were a competitive athlete, bodybuilder, right? Mm-hmm. Personal trainer,
yeah,
and many other things in the world of fitness.
Yeah.
And took really great care of yourself.
Most of my life.
Yeah. So was it puzzling to you when you got sick?
Yeah, I don't have any of the genetic markers. There would be no reason to think that I would be somebody that would have this happen. We know now there are some things that, besides the environment things, like my mother took DES, which is an estrogen-based drug that they now know causes this type of cancer as well as other reproductive cancers. Mm-hmm. I did use talcum powder, which is right now the big debate, mm-hmm. but we really think the number one thing was the stress that I was under for a couple of years, before, because my condition as far as being in such good shape is probably what kept me from ever really getting it. The environment might have been there, but the switch hadn't been turned on. Mm-hmm. And then I was under a lot of stress for a few years, and the switch just got turned on, is what I'm coming to actually really believe is the reason why.
So now we're down here at Rhythmia, and we're filming this project, and mm-hmm. here you are, and I guess you started to come down here saying, you know what, I want to do this. That maybe there's something here for me to discover about myself, or
sure.
what's going on with me. But then you found out based on one of your interventions that maybe they weren't going to allow you to do ayahuasca, and then that just recently flipped. So tell the story about your roller coaster ride in getting here.
Yeah. First of all, my integrative oncologist that I'm working with, when we told her that we were coming here to do this, she was excited that I would have the possibility to do it. She actually sends people here.
Cancer patients?
Cancer patients.
And why does she do that?
Because there's a lot of healing, emotional healing, and it's her belief that a lot of the reasons that people have cancer is it's one of the switches that turns it on, is the stresses of the trauma, is the things that you are maybe holding on to that you need to release, and doing stuff like this, like ayahuasca or whatnot, can help with releasing that. So she was very excited that I was going to come, and we were all set for me to come. And when I had to turn in my health record, the contraindication was that I'm doing IV therapies, and one of them is IV mistletoe. Mm-hmm. And so they told me that because of that I wasn't able. And I just thought, fine, I'll still go and participate in the breathing exercises and do all that. And we got here and visited with the medical staff, and they were perfectly fine. They said, nope, as long as you're not doing it. I haven't taken my IV for 5 days. They said, as long as it's been a few days afterwards, you're fine. I just can't take it while I'm on the medicine.
So basically, you had an intervention that they said you can't mix with ayahuasca, but you've had enough gap now. So mm-hmm. How long ago was it that you found out that you can actually now do the ayahuasca?
Oh, I don't know, 5 hours, 4 hours.
So it's just recent?
Yeah, so we just got here and found out. And it really was the Jerry that we started talking to, and he said, he's like, you need to be doing this.
Jerry's the founder.
He's the founder, yeah. And so he's like, I don't understand why. And so he messaged the doctor, and then the doctor had us come in, and they all agreed that there should be no reason why I can't do it.
So was that relief? Like, oh, great? Has it
Has
created,
Yeah.
more like anxiety?
Well, because I wasn't expecting it at first. It wasn't relief at all. It was more like, oh shoot, now I really am going to do it, because I hadn't, at this point I'm thinking I'm not doing it, so I'm not preparing myself for it. Right. And now I'm like, oh wait, do I have fear? I think I have a little anxiety, not a lot of fear, more of just a little bit of anxiety of what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, in many respects, you have a lot at stake, right? I mean, you're battling cancer right now.
Yeah.
It's the second time you're doing it.
Yeah.
Your integrative oncologist says that this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And then you find out you can't do it. And then, now 5 hours ago, you can do it. And I think most people that I've spoken to, at least so far, they knew for weeks that, they were coming, and they've been kind of getting their mindsets, et cetera. So yeah, it's got to be weird to say suddenly game is on, we thought it was canceled.
Yeah, I think the main thing I'm grateful about is that my diet is pretty clean. Mm-hmm. I know that that's one of the things that they want you to do, so I'm like, okay, ace that part.
Yeah.
But as far as like the mental prep, it is a little bit, I'm having to be like, okay, we're doing this now. Mm. And it's okay. Yeah. And I am actually excited to see how the outcome is.
What are you expecting, or what's the best thing that could happen?
I'm not 100% sure as what I'm expecting. I really hope that whatever that switch is that turned on for me is revealed. Mm. I want to face that, mm-hmm. and have it be something that can be taken care of. And I'd love a miracle, to tell you the truth. Mm. I'd love a miracle and have it go home, and all of a sudden it's either cancer's gone or it's going away or whatever. I'd love a miracle.
Well, I think you're extraordinarily brave for showing up, and especially again on short notice being willing to do this, and maybe even braver for your willingness to sit down and share this with me here and with a bunch of other people who are going to see it. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to getting updates from you.
Thank you. This will be fun.
Elliot, tell us a little bit about your background, your life, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So as you can probably tell from my accent, I grew up in the UK. Mm-hmm. Moved to the United States about 4 years ago when I met a girl who's from Utah, where we live now.
It's always about a girl,
It's always about a girl, yeah. And I always wanted to be that romantic that chased after a girl, I like that. And when I met my wife, it was on the cards that was going to happen. Everyone knew it was going to happen. And then when I came to the US, I just found it the most incredible place I've ever lived. I just love the people, and especially Utah. Mm-hmm. And I managed to get a great job working, as you guys know, with you guys. And then around 6 or 7 months in, I started noticing that I was putting on lots of weight, and I was just reacting really badly to the food here. Mm. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm here now, is because my body just isn't reacting to anything I eat. And I've tried everything, and so this is kind of what you do. You do these things either with inspiration or desperation, and kind of where I'm at right now is kind of desperation. So I'm putting everything in on this particular practice, hoping it's going to give me some success and bring back some quality of life.
So do you think your weight issue is related to something psychological or something? What do you think it's about?
Yeah, well, that's what a lot of my doctors are saying, is that they're prescribing IBS, and a lot of that is anxiety laden, but I don't really feel that stressed. I actually feel I have much more balance in my life than when I did when I was in the UK. Mm-hmm. I'm socializing more, I'm eating relatively better, actually. But yeah, it can be one of those things where your gut just gets out of balance when you move to a new country. Mm-hmm. There are new stresses, there are new, things like that. So in a sense, it's like a cumulative effect. Mm-hmm. It's the diet, it's the anxiety, and it's also the food, which is never, I don't know what they put in here, but it tastes different. It tastes different, that's for sure.
So, and to be clear, we're not in the United States right now.
No.
We're in Costa Rica.
Very true.
Your childhood, was your life, did you have a normal life? You feel like you had traumas in your life? Are there things about the history of your life that you think might have a bearing as to what might happen here?
Well, not really. I mean, my childhood was pretty normal. Grew up in a small village in England, played football with my brother. That's soccer for everyone else.
Yeah.
I think my childhood was very, very normal. I mean, when I got into my teen years, we moved away into a new village and I found it hard to assimilate with new people. And then, you're different, you're the new kid, and I started to, there was bullying and all that kind of stuff. But I never regretted that happening to me because it made it very easy to leave those people and leave that city. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here now. Very, very easy for me to go somewhere and then leave it within a couple of years. I never really know where home is.
Yeah.
Anything that's ever happened to me in my childhood, I've kind of said it's been for the better because it's got me where I am now. So it hasn't really been my childhood, but maybe some things happened when I got to my 18, 19, 20, where I just found that everything needed to be in excess, alcohol, food, and then movies, obviously.
Yes.
So I guess really it's more of a balance type deal, which was what I'm looking for here.
Have you ever had any kind of experience with any psychedelic medicines or plant medicines of any variety before?
No, so Patrick, if you'd have told me 5 years ago that I'm going to be in a resort doing psychedelic drugs, I would have thought you were on psychedelic drugs. Okay? This is so out of my comfort zone, it's unreal. I'm not going to admit on camera if I've done any drugs before, but let's just say that then it's not really my scene.
Yeah.
I like to keep a clear head. And I found since I've come to America, I haven't really drunk much alcohol either. I kind of just worry about what the laws are, especially in Utah, with what you can and can't drink. So psychedelic drugs have never really been my scene. But when this opportunity arose, when I was working on this series and I was realizing all these therapeutic effects to ayahuasca, and not just on my gut, but also maybe even waking you up, making you worry less about things and work over certain relationships, I couldn't turn it down.
So tell me about because you already suffer with anxiety, you said, right? So tell me about your state now. You're about to go into a series of 4 nights, 4 ayahuasca journeys.
Yeah.
Right? How are you feeling about it?
I've never been so nervous in my entire life. It is literally like, I told the cameraman the other day, it's almost like I'm waiting for the electric chair. I really don't know what to expect. Obviously, I'm positive that this is going to be life-changing for me. I know I've got so much family back home in the UK and the US wanting this to be a wake-up call for me. I have no idea what to expect, but I have to think positive. And if I come out of this and I'm more sociable and I have better, everything about my life changes, then that's a positive. I could come out of this and it could make everything worse, but I don't know. You got to have a little faith, I guess.
So your family, people back home, people close to you know that you're doing this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did anybody try to talk you out of it or say you're crazy or you shouldn't be doing this, you're going to lose your mind?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think everyone's mother sort of do this. When I told my mum, she doesn't really know what it is. I think she thought that I was just going to come here and get high for 4 days. So I don't really know how to explain it to her. But my brother, my sister, my dad, my wife's extended family are all very supportive of it. Friends of my wife who have now become good friends of mine have been texting me all the time since I've come here. So it seems like the stars have aligned for this to be like a perfect thing to happen for me because everyone's rooting for me. It's just, it's very difficult for me because this is massively out of my comfort zone. Like even in the, what you're eating, like, I was just in the buffet just a second ago. I don't recognize 80% of the foods that are there. I'm like, what's this, what's that? And everything needs to be different this week. So it's going to be a learning curve, but I'm looking forward to it.
I have to say, personally, when I heard that you were doing this, I was surprised. Yeah, it's like, wow, he raised his hand, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I'll be honest, if I didn't have IBS and gut issues and I wasn't sure that this could help, I probably wouldn't have done it because it would have been too far out of my comfort zone. But, I guess you kind of have to do new things to challenge yourself. And, I just turned 30 last year and, it's all about moving forward. And I feel like this is right for me right now, just to sort of wake me up and maybe let me think about some things. And then we'll see how it goes.
A common thing I hear from people is that ayahuasca calls them, that they feel like they're being called to go do this particular ceremony.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it called you, or do you feel like you just said, hey, this is an opportunity, I thought I'd jump on it?
Well, yeah, the opportunity was great, but it's unbelievable when people ask me about how this happened. It was so coincidental. I was working on this series, as you know, I'm an assistant editor, and I was watching one of the brilliant interviews you did with Dr. Dan Engel, and he mentioned in that moment how IBS was good for ayahuasca, and that happened to be about 3 weeks before Jeff was going to book this trip anyway. Yeah. And it all just, the stars aligned. It literally did. And, before I knew it, this trip came up, and when I was offered it, there was just no way I could say no. So, yeah, it does feel like there's some divine intervention. I don't know, who knows?
Just know we're all rooting for you. Yeah, we really hope you have a spectacular experience, and but it is walking into the unknown. So
sure.
we're looking forward to following up conversations and seeing how it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it too. We'll see how it goes. I mean, if it's an absolute living nightmare, like I'm sitting in a cinema and I'm just watching Michael Bay films, that I'm not going to be happy with that. I'm hoping that I can really think over some things and go back to someone I was when I was a little bit younger, maybe. So yes, thank you for saying that, Patrick, and we'll follow up in 5 days.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Patrick.
James D., thanks so much for taking the time. I'm excited to hear why you're here and what you're expecting this week. Let's maybe go ladies first. First of all, you're doing this together, right?
Right.
We should just establish that, right? And so,
We just met.
Oh, you just met? Wow.
Got married on the way in.
This is the first date?
It's a great plane ride.
I bet. This is interesting. So what got you here? Let's start with Dee. What got you here?
We have it good. We like each other. We have a really good time. And so I've got this, I have no idea why, but I carry something with me for quite a while. I am quick to anger, and there's no reason for it. Realize it in the moment when it's happening. So why can't I realize it that moment before it happens? And I've worked on it, and you can go back and you can look in your childhood, and I've got the whys of it. That's okay, but it hasn't helped me stop it. So I think I'd like some help to maybe catch it before it goes, because I've hurt some relationships with it, and I don't wish to go further on that anymore. I'd like to, at this point in my life, I'd really like to get rid of that. I'd like to have gotten rid of it a long time ago, and I don't seem to be able to do that on my own. Maybe I have some insight in how I can maybe cut that off of the past before it comes.
But what makes you think ayahuasca would do that?
Oh, goodness.
You're going to have to get deep here.
What makes me think? Maybe I don't know myself as well as I do. And if I could maybe get more of a grasp on that. And I've read a little bit about ayahuasca and what it can do. I mean, both physically, mentally, the neurons, and everything. I think maybe if I got to know myself just a little bit better and figured out why I'm going there, and be able to catch myself, maybe I could cut it off then. It's a thought.
Interesting.
Yes.
Whose idea was this?
No, you were first on this. You've been looking for this a little bit longer.
Okay. That was great. It's almost like you planned it. All right, James, tell us why
Same
you're
question?
here. Yeah.
Well, I know, despite what she said, she's been interested in this for a while. So I did. My first inclination was, this seemed like such a unique experience that if I didn't share it, we wouldn't be able to talk about it.
Right. Sure.
Right? And I did not want her to have something that I hope is really profound and be on the outside. And then as I started thinking about it, and it's been an interesting process just the last, it's been about 4 weeks since we decided to do it. Self-examination, like what do I want to try to get out of it, and chipping away and getting deeper and deeper, and we're kind of landing at a place where my inner voice is, like, I like to think of myself as a very nice person, very kind, and most people around me think I'm kind. My inner voice is not.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Violent.
Yeah.
As a kid and a young man, I had a violent streak. Fortunately, I got into martial arts early, so I had an outlet. You understand
And
that?
we might say that you're a very accomplished martial artist.
Yeah,
right?
we found a place where we could punch people and be all right, right? Your best friends punch you back, and it's okay at the end of the day. But kindness is something I hold in high regard, but my inner voice is frequently not. And as you know, as somebody who's trained, you start running scenarios where what you can do to somebody, and it's not pretty.
Yeah.
So I feel at odds with me. Sorry, I do think it's important to keep some bit of a violent streak alive in this world. I gotta, she's my everything. No one's allowed to anger her.
Right.
But I'd like to be a little bit more in alignment with me. Mm-hmm. It's been a long time, but a lot of behaviors in my past that I'm ashamed of. Mm-hmm. And I realize that they are in my past, mm-hmm. but I still carry them.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a time where you can set it down and walk away. I've had a hard time finding that. And every now and then it intrudes on us, and she's way too important to have anything intrude. So it's been just really the journey from the opportunity to come here. The 4-week journey of self-evaluation has gone way deeper than anything I'd done before just to arrive. So now you don't know what you don't know. I'm open, interested, and
we're both very open to this.
Yeah. So this is interesting to me. It seems like your process began once you made the decision.
Very much so.
In other words, you're saying that there's already introspection going on just because you made the decision to come here and do this. Are either of you nervous about this or worried about what might happen?
Well, I'll tell you, when we decided, I was equal parts terrified and intrigued. Uh-huh. And over the course of the 4 weeks, it's been an interesting process. Terrified and intrigued, and then intrigued with the terror, and then just intrigued to where I know, I believe it's going to be very difficult, mm-hmm. it's going to be very rewarding, and I'm intrigued.
I've had good friends that have done this.
Yeah.
And so, no, I have not. I've been really cool about it. I look
I know,
forward to
it surprised me.
And but I have had friends that this has helped small scale, large scale, and they've all gone back and done it again. So I have nothing to fear from it. I don't think.
Have any of your friends done it 4 nights in a row?
We have sent
4 nights in a row. No.
We have sent 5 different friends
mm-hmm. to do this. And yet we haven't done it because we'd heard such good things about it prior to that as well. So no, 4 nights in a row. That was a...
Yeah, I got a call from a friend who was not just suicidal, but he had put a bag over his head and pumped argon gas in.
Wow.
He had read that he'd go to sleep and never wake up. Mm-hmm. And for some reason he reached out to me. Mm-hmm. And when we got talking, I'd known him from jiu-jitsu for 20 some years. Mm-hmm. We'd get together, roll around, choke each other, and high five and see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then he started opening up. He was in Gulf War I as a sniper. He had all kinds of childhood trauma. Mm. So he's been through all kinds of treatments, and none of them were working. It took him to that place where he put a bag over his head to kill himself. Wow. And I had, through Jeff, my friendship with Jeff Hayes, we'd heard more about plant medicine. Mm-hmm. So I sent him links, told him all about it, and he went and did one journey, turned him around completely.
Yeah, it did.
It's like a miracle.
Oh,
and the interesting thing is,
he calls it that. So,
does he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody that needed this, and then all of a sudden he shows up. We meet, we find out about plant medicine, and then Charlie calls, and then somebody else that I know. He's struggling really bad. Mm-hmm. And then somebody else, and then somebody else. Oh, yeah. So we've sent 5 people to do ayahuasca journeys, and it's been remarkable for them.
They've all gone back and done another journey afterwards.
Yeah.
So
Steve's got no worry.
None.
You obviously through your training, you're used to controlling your circumstances, right? So
yes.
How does the idea of not being able to be in control, how does that land with you saying, I'm going to, my mind's going to kind of maybe get taken over, and I'm not going to have control. It
lands like a Chevy. Right? I mean, it's hard. It's because I don't like that feeling of losing. When we have a beer, we split it. Because if I have more than half, well, she drinks more than half. If I have more, the moment I get that feeling, like something's, I don't like it.
No. Yeah.
Wow.
So the idea of this. Now, I will admit, through a dear friend, we did an MDMA. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was just this remarkable, right? It was a blast. I came out of it knowing my one thing, right? I did. I like woke up. I didn't wake up, but I mean, I stood up from it and went, I'm so good. I got my one thing, right? How cool is that? I got one thing, and that's make her happy. And if I do that right, I'll have all my dreams. So that's the closest I've ever come. So this, I have a very healthy nervousness about this because I don't like not being in control.
Well, it's going to get very interesting. Yeah, really interesting. So this is going to happen now, starting tomorrow, 4 nights, and you're both. Yeah, and you are both committed to the full program.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just whatever it brings, it brings. So I'm going to really be looking forward to updates to see
Absolutely.
how this goes.
I'm a believer, but I'm, like I said, originally frightened of it, but I have a healthy respect for it. But I really want to, I want to let go of some fears, some shame, it's a lot I want to let go of. I've got it good, Patrick.
Yeah.
I've got it so good. I'm living a dream, but I got baggage that I still can't let go of. And every now and then it gets in the way, and I hate that. She deserves better than that. I deserve better than that. What the hell?
So how do you feel about being the motivation for him to do this?
He just wants to put it off on me if it goes bad. That's all. Let's go. He can say, "You brought me here." No, I'm the same.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about with anger, words matter. They really do. You can't take them back.
Yeah.
And so, if I could just find that balance, and there's no reason to carry anger. I have it really good. I have no reason to carry that. I do. And so I would like to let that go. And it seems simple. And I just think I need a little more help with that.
Beautiful.
You did inherit it.
I'm not gonna go there.
You inherited it.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being so open and willing to share your story and the experience with us. And I have a lot of anticipation about seeing what the next conversation is going to be as we get updated from you. So thanks so much.
Yeah, this is
Thank
from
you.
somebody who does not like to lose control at all. Like I said, we split a beer because if I have more than a half, I like, wait a minute, am I feeling that beer? I don't want it. So I know I need to, what do they say? The only way out is through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's also a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I think you're up to it. Let's see what happens.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next episode, you'll just be holding me. Just give it a few minutes, folks. You'll be all right.
Gotta pick him up off the floor.
just don't leave me, Patrick.
This is great. All right, I'll be there for you.
Thank you. I know you will.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Kathleen, I'm really fascinated to understand what got you to want to do what you're going to do this week. Can you kind of give us a little background on that?
Well, I'm a psychotherapist and I specialize in trauma. And this is kind of the latest and the greatest way to emphasize and, move trauma therapy along. It's been very effective with a few people I work with and also very difficult for a few people I work with. But I'm really fascinated by its potential.
When you say it's really helped a few people, these are people who had trauma and they did ayahuasca. And what happened?
Well, they haven't specifically done ayahuasca, but other types of psychedelics, and what I understand is these all really work with the same receptors in the brain. I think each one is nuanced in its own way, which I'm still really learning about. But as far as the neurological aspects, it seems to be, kind of across the board, really successful. So that's really the piece I'm very interested in, is how it impacts the brain, how it resets receptors, how it regrows dendrites, which are often damaged in severe trauma. So
on the personal side, What what are you searching for, or do you have trauma in your own life that you're thinking that you might be able to heal that you haven't been through, say, conventional psychotherapy?
I feel like I probably don't have more trauma than, the next person walking down the street. I've never been diagnosed with PTSD or anything. But I think, I've taken a special interest in it. I kind of went through an interesting time in my life. In October of 2019, I got a pretty bad injury to my shoulder, and I'm a runner, and I love to run, and that's usually my outlet for stress. And so this injury kind of led to that running not going so well anymore. And so just feeling like, really bummed about that. And then, the pandemic hit. And so I really started to notice myself kind of emotionally go downhill, kind of like, okay, I need to do something. What am I going to do? And I decided to give ketamine a try. And so I've done about 8 ketamine treatments. And that's been really, really fascinating for me.
Fascinating how?
Well, I will say I was a stone cold atheist when I went in, and I am not anymore. So
wow,
that's pretty big.
That's pretty big. Stone cold atheist, not just an atheist, but a stone cold atheist, and you're not anymore. So
yeah, I know these are big statements.
Yeah. So was that after 1 ketamine treatment, 5? I mean, when did you have the shift?
Well, I will give a little background on the atheism. I was raised in a house that was pretty stone cold atheist. And so that's probably why I use the word stone cold. I feel like it was really gradual, and it was really subtle. And so, I would say maybe 4 or 5 treatments in, I just came out of it feeling like, yeah, like I'm really much more open to that idea. And I feel it in a way that's deeper than, intellectually. And so, that's kind of just grown. I also had an interesting experience with ketamine which ketamine is not super visual, but I did have a really interesting experience where I felt like I met my higher self. And that, it just makes you start to think like, well, how can this be going on if this is all there is? And, these questions that kind of, that start to come up. And a lot of comfort with those questions. Like, I don't have the answer, and I don't feel like I will have the answer, but I'm comfortable with that. And so that's very new. I felt like I met a different version of myself, and, all I can say is that she cleaned everything up.
Nice.
And I think that ketamine is not as visual as ayahuasca, and that's one of the reasons I'm really interested to try it.
Do you think you ever would have done the ayahuasca if it weren't for the ketamine treatments? So that was sort of like a transition point to open you up to other experiences now. Definitely.
Wow. Yeah. I've always thought psychedelics were interesting, but maybe not for me. Too out of control, and I've found it to be very powerful. So I'm very interested to see what comes up. And
do you think ketamine made you a better therapist?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I think I have a consultant I work with, and she says she believes every human should have ketamine. So I kind of am in that pool. I think that it creates more resilience. It's doing things, into the brain that just can't be done with pure psychotherapy. However, like I have done a lot of psychotherapy, not just with other people, but I've sat on the other side of the couch, and I've probably done at least 8 years of my own therapy, and I think that's a big piece of it. And there were maybe some stuck points that this has really pushed through.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you nervous about this week?
A little bit, but not terribly. I think that my experiences with the ketamine have given me a lot of confidence, and so I'm not really afraid. Curious, for sure I know there'll be hard points. And I think that's where, training that I have as far as like being able to be with something and notice it and not turn away, like that really comes in handy. So.
Wow. So especially because you know people who said had some bad experiences, right?
Yes,
You know, they had
yes.
tough experiences, but you're feeling, you're
Yeah.
seemingly very confident. About how
Yeah,
this is
well,
gonna go.
I think people with trauma, especially severe childhood trauma, they will typically go into some level of flashback. And so, at least that's what I understand. And so, that's where you really have, I think your really best practice is to have someone who can help guide and help ground and help, move through that and use that experience therapeutically. I think in the right setting, it's absolutely necessary, but sometimes with, the way this is all new and blooming right now, people end up in situations, I'm going to go out to the desert and, do a bunch of something, and then that doesn't really go well. Or I'm going to go do ketamine in a ketamine clinic where there's no trained mental health therapist at all, so that's kind of what I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what evolves for you through the experience, and I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, thank you.
Christy, tell us a little bit about your background, your life trajectory.
So since I was little, I've been on a search for something. Knowledge, information, like if there's a challenge, I'm always like, yes. And in my 20s and my teens, it really served me. I did a lot of things. I was in acting class and my acting teacher said, "This is really hard for you, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, it is." I have an engineering degree and then went into acting. Like I just took on anything that seemed fun and challenging. And lots of incredible stuff happened. And then I got married and pregnant, and it was a really bad relationship. And I slowly gave my power away.
What does that mean?
I thought that to be a good wife and mother meant if I just love him, doesn't matter what I want, then that's what I'm supposed to be here for. I asked my husband, can I go back to school? He said no. And so I said, okay, I'm here to take care of my son and my husband. And slowly after 15 years, he told me I was ugly. He told me I was stupid. He told me I needed plastic surgery all the time. He would make fun of me. And at the end of that marriage, I was not the same person that I was in my 20s. And that was 2 years ago, and I had a cancer scare and a divorce. And I was on a path of like searching, just anything I could do, I was doing it. I knew I needed to be healed.
Is that what you were searching for? Healing, or what do you think you were searching for?
I just knew I wasn't happy. I knew my life wasn't how I wanted it. I knew the way I was being was not the right way, finally. So that was one huge step. And I knew I made a decision to do whatever it took to get back to myself. And so after all this work, so many incredible things, like my life is transformed, and I kept hearing about journeys, and I kept hearing these incredible stories. And so I feel like I've done everything spiritually. I'm at an incredible place where I knew how to take myself there. I've done, you name it. But I feel like this is the next step into a big transformation, because I don't do aspirin, I don't do medicine, and drugs have always been, I'm a control freak, so it's a big deal to be here.
What are some of, you said you heard a bunch of stories about journeys, so tell me what you think was the best story and what you think was the scariest story.
I didn't hear any scary stories till I got here.
Are you having second thoughts?
No.
Okay.
And I'm scared. Two incredible stories, and these are silicon men who aren't very woo-woo. One told me he realized fear was not real. And the second one told me that all he could see was light, and he was surprised at how all we do is focus on the darkness. And I know that intuitively, like I can feel that, and I want to experience it.
What'd you hear that started to scare you a little bit?
Because I'm a control freak, I did marijuana, and I was like, no, I didn't like that feeling, because I like to control that's the part I know I'm going to have to just let that go. Throwing up might be a little fear, but I think the loss of control is the biggest thing.
So, did you have a particular intention or expectation from doing this process here?
Yes. I'm ready to get me back.
What does that mean?
So when I got a divorce, I saw this huge light, this huge person of who I am, and I'm ready to be that person again.
Wow. You think doing this has a high probability of getting you there, or what's your expectation?
I know it is. It's been about 3 years. It's been on my bucket list, so I already know it is. So I feel it. And the way it came together, I didn't want to do it by myself. I wanted to be surrounded by people who love me, and it's safe, and look at this place. I mean, I feel like it all came together as timing-wise, everything should.
Well, we're going to follow you along the way. So we're really excited to see how this unfolds for you, and of course we're rooting for you, and I hope you get everything you want.
Thank you, Patrick. It was fun. We'll see. Cross fingers.
Yeah. Okay, so let me guess. You can't wait to see what happens here. Here you got these 6 individuals. You have a couple, which of course is very interesting, and these other 4 individuals. They're there. They showed up. They're looking forward to an experience. There's trepidation, there's excitement, there's all these things. And I happen to know what happened because we filmed them all through their experience, but I can't wait for you to see what happens. I think it's going to blow your mind. Well, that concludes episode 1 of our 9-part docu-series, Psychedelics Revealed. As you can see, I wasn't overstating it when I said this stuff is mind-blowing, and it's only going to get more so. We have a lot of road in front of us. This is going to be an incredible journey. Again, pardon the pun, because that's the phrase people like to use when they're on psychedelics. They're on a journey. This is going to be a journey with you and I that we're going to take through these 9 episodes, and I think you are going to be thrilled and excited about what you see. So thanks for being here. Remember, we're still in the free viewing period right at the beginning of it, so share this with someone you know so that they can get this information also. We're here to change lives with this information, so I appreciate your helping us do that. I'll see you in episode 2.
Part of them that is searching, that is their real self trying to come out. And they may be more identified with their compulsive behaviors, coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, personalities, subpersonalities. They may be identified with all of that, but whether it's in desperation or inspiration, that which is trying to come out, that's them trying to come out. Right. So with every movement towards waking up, you become less identified with the temporary and more identified with the eternal.
The human body is both hardware and software, and we've looked at it up to this point from a hardware perspective. So if we can't see your illness, it doesn't exist. If we can't measure your illness, it doesn't exist, right? If we can't cut it out of you, it doesn't exist. And so when you look at the body simply as hardware, it's like looking at your computer as a piece of hardware. The computer is only as effective as the software, and the software is the parts of us that we can't see.
My father passed away when he was 68. We were visiting and we were embraced, right? So I've got my arms around him, he has his arms around me, and it was just this perfect, father-son love. And then while we're holding each other, I literally melted back in time. 20s, teens, down to an infant, all while in his arms. I got all the way back down to infancy.
The question was, what do you want? The thought was, I want the surgery. I want the cancer to be removed spiritually. The next thing that came to me is, who are you to ask for this? Because I wasn't sure if it was me saying that to myself or if it was something trying to get something out of me. So the next thing I heard was, why don't you just ask for what you want and believe? Because then I started to think, if I can ask to have my cancer removed, why can't my whole body be healed?